Yes.
Welcome to FAB Conversations. I am Sonu Bhasin, and FAB is Families and Business. This is a podcast where we have conversations about people, about business, and about business people. And even though I say it myself, these conversations are pretty interesting. And therefore, what are you waiting for? Do subscribe to my channel, and it is completely free to you. So, today's conversation and today's guest. So, Anup Jain is someone who I have known for a few decades now, and I have seen him blossom into a multifaceted professional. He has a sharp mind, extremely sharp, and is someone who can have a conversation with you about the most complex matters and then talk about wine very knowledgeably and then be the life of the party by playing just the right music. As a professional, he spent a large part of his career across companies like P&G, Yum is Pizza Hut, etc., Whirlpool of India, Bata in the consumer space before becoming a VC and an investor. At Orius, he was the managing partner and he led some fairly interesting investments, 16 of them, including companies like Battery Smart, Nextwave, and Varaha. And I'm sure we'll talk about them in our conversation. And currently, he is a founding partner of a soon to be launched India Focus Fund. So, Anup, welcome to FAB Conversations. And how are you doing today? And the fact that we are almost color coordinated has nothing to do about me telling you that, I'm going to be in pink.
Thanks, Sonu. Lovely to be on your Conversations show over here. I was wondering when I would be on this show, and I was getting mighty, envious of everyone else. So I think my turn has come. So which is great.
Sabar ka phal meetha hota hai. As I keep telling professionals and young managers of today, guys, don't be in a hurry. Sabar ka phal meetha hota hai. And look, here we are talking to each other.
That is true. Delayed gratification, as they say, is always very good. And especially now that I've turned entrepreneur in my own way, soon to be announced fund, as you've already sort of announced it. Yes. Certainly looking forward, to setting up something exciting.
Great. So, let's go back to your career. So you've had a diverse career across consumer industries and then financial services. Now, which part of your engineering and or MBA did truly help you?
I thought that, we will ask some pretty staid questions and, we won't be embarrassing each other. But since you've decided to walk down this path, let me respond. So, most engineers during our time actually landed up doing MBAs. Even if you see the MBA class of today, it is overweighted in favor of engineers, simply because, quant and numerical skills were required. But look, life comes full circle. India is now progressing on the field of technology, but also infrastructure. And I've seen distinctly sort of two phases of value creation. One is, when we were simply becoming employees of international brands, the so-called MNCs, where the intellectual property was created by them. All we were doing was, helping them in a go-to-market strategy in India, accessing Indian consumers, building, their brands in India. And we were sort of their agents, if I may call it.
Agents.
Right? And for expansion in India.
Yeah.
But in my new role as
very well, I must say.
Yes. So, we were not developing anything which was new and striking that we could call our own. And we were merely extending markets for them in India because they were obviously hungry for newer markets and newer consumers. So we played a role over there as, employees. In the new phase, and a new chapter of my career, which is, venture capital as an investor, what I see is also two phases. In the last 10 years, we were merely replicating, mostly speaking, models which existed in Silicon Valley and in other developed markets. Whether it was, an Amazon to a Flipkart, whether it was an Uber to an Ola, and basically replicating some of these productivity enhancing platforms, marketplaces, connecting demand and supply, and writing the software for it, right? But in the new phase, to your question, what I'm seeing is actually now a new wave of entrepreneurs who
Hmm.
are very keen to do intellectual property creation.
Hmm.
And which means that life comes full circle, and the engineering that I did but did not use for most of the time, if I may be, sort of
Honest enough.
quite candid and yeah, quite candid and about it, and mixed with the management degree. I don't know where it got lost because it was we were just busy, as I said, creating markets.
Yeah.
So I learned a whole lot of advertising and marketing principles, but didn't really get to practice engineering. Of
Hmm.
course, the quantum numerical abilities do help you throughout your career. There is no doubt, and especially so, I think it helps me to bridge over into financial services
Right.
because we deal with numbers every day. Uh, but now what we are doing is actually putting that scientific orientation, that engineering orientation now actually into play. So we
Hmm.
are doing this in the area of space. We're doing this in the area of climate and sustainability,
Yeah.
and especially this space because if you have to remove carbon emissions, then very clearly you need to understand chemistry at the very
Hmm.
basic minimum and need to understand how that works,
Hmm.
how cement and steel and various other activities, construction, and how we go about our daily lives.
Yeah.
How can we reduce fossil-borne carbon emissions?
Hmm.
So yes, it is now coming in handy. So parts of it, but not quite completely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, you said that, you didn't use a large part of your engineering or neither your management. So I didn't do engineering, but I did do BSc mathematics. And there are people who ask me today, are you using any of that maths? I heard I hate math. I don't know why the Americans use math. I still prefer good old maths. So they asked me whether I still use maths. And I don't use maths, but I think the 3 years of studying mathematics actually conditioned my mind to follow a certain process in solving
Mhm.
a problem. So today, when I'm faced with a situation, I I think subconsciously my mind just breaks it down into a problem and then works out various equations and looks at various solutions and then does a quick check around probability of success and arrives at a solution. And I think this just is because my mind was conditioned. So engineering, I know enough people who did chemical, textile, mechanical, and then they were all selling sweetened, colored, aerated water for the bulk of their careers. But I think it is just the grounding that they do. But I just want to ask you something related to education and the kind of work that you're doing now. You're
Mhm.
dealing with a lot of promoters, and you said that they are interested
Yeah.
in creating IPs. Now, when you, as an investor, are looking at a company and therefore at a promoter, how important are the education qualifications? And the reason I ask is because at least my generation, our generation, we've grown up believing that a postgraduate degree is a must and that you are nothing if you don't have the right degrees and get a first class first, etc. What is your
Mhm.
experience with these young promoters?
So it's a bit mixed actually, and there is no right or wrong. I think the learning is that if you have the entrepreneurial orientation,
Yeah.
and which means a very strong commitment towards what you're setting out to do, you're prepared to make sacrifices because the road is not going to be easy. Rome wasn't built in a day, and no business has been built in even a year.
Yeah.
It is going to take years and years of sweat and toil and unpredictable circumstances along the way, which you'll have to deal with. Uh, so what you require is more, I would say, mental grit and commitment
Mhm.
rather than degrees. In fact, degrees sometimes tend to come in the way, if I may, say for the general population, because
How so?
if yes, because degrees tend to make you access opportunities as an employee right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you start getting used to the monthly sort of compensation, then it makes you risk averse. Why take so much
Right.
trouble? What am I going to
Mm-hmm.
get out of it? My needs are covered. I can save money. The good old, middle class, upbringing that most people have. So why bother? And then life passes by, people
Mm-hmm.
get into family situations, responsibilities, kids, everything. So one just gives up. If one had even a little small element of trying their hand at entrepreneurship, one kind of gives it up if one
Mm-hmm.
has access to opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And degrees make that far easier than anything else. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that having been said, there are certain, fields, and especially the tech space, where
Mm-hmm.
having the basic skill set is absolutely required. How will you command an army of software engineers or product managers, which is tech product managers, and how will you build the most efficient, platform, for transactions for millions of people transacting at the same time, if you don't have that basic training in software and computing?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's where some of these degrees and skills come in handy.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think, um, 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 as an investor, at an early stage, there are no profit and loss and balance sheets to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So very often investors do use a good academic background
Mm-hmm.
as a surrogate for a probability of success in the future,
Right.
right?
Right.
It shows some level of achievement orientation.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think mixed with that is also leadership orientation.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly, as an investor, would prefer a profile. If there were two profiles and they had similar academic backgrounds, maybe same institutes and same disciplines, I would prefer somebody who has shown leadership potential in terms of, extracurricular, contributions. So maybe, president of a society in college, or contributing to something which is, college wide, participating in inter-university stuff. So, and winning some accolades over there. So it just shows achievement orientation of a higher order.
Mm-hmm.
Also, ability to command respect from peers.
Right.
So, the good old thing about being a head boy or a head girl in school, and similar, prefects and, all of that. So I think it translated at the college level. If you're president of the union, or you are, heading the placement committee, and you've had some of the best placements, that can be certainly an addition to the profile.
Right.
So that also helps. And of course, business clubs and business schools and things like that.
All that helps. Yeah.
Mm.
So part of our conversation is also about personal experiences. And as
Mm.
we've all traversed through our corporate and other professional journeys, we've had hits and we've had misses. Uh, would you want to share some of your hits and misses here?
Yeah, so I think life's been a roller coaster of hits and misses.
Yeah.
Um, I think every hit, what I've realized is definitely takes you higher. But the moment we start,
Sorry to interrupt, but which is the one hit that you're insanely proud about?
well, different phases,
Yeah.
So when I was finishing my MBA, of course, it was definitely a big hit to be selected
And you know,
as a
FMS is one of
management.
the best business schools.
Oh, that's true. And, I couldn't be more delighted that we had some of the best companies visiting us when
Yeah.
I graduated. And it was a big delight, at that point of time, to be in the final shortlist with, Unilever, P&G, and Nestle. And then I finally got accepted into P&G. So I was absolutely over the moon. So I think that was a real high, because it's a great culture. I still, really fondly miss it,
Hmm.
and that's big, and it's given me some great lifelong friendships.
Yeah.
So, and that's the hallmark of a great culture, actually.
Hmm.
So I feel really delighted. I feel really blessed in that sense that,
Hmm.
one was able to get so many lifelong friends who will stand by you, support you, give
Hmm.
you counsel and advice. and you can contribute as well. And there are so many examples of it. I mean, I would like, reach out to them at any point of time, and it's
Yeah.
almost like there is no gap that has taken place over all these years and decades. So that was clearly a hit. A second company which I greatly appreciate, and I spent my longest stint in my career, was again a very good culture, a great culture, was Yum Restaurants. So got the opportunity to work in India, got the opportunity to work in Australia. So I think that was also a big hit. So these, I think, are two of my most, the ones that I can clearly remember.
So again, since you did bring up Australia and you worked in India and you worked in multinationals. So one thing about multinationals is that they have kind of standardization across countries, right? But people are different across countries. So how did you transition from being a manager in India, dealing with chaos and dealing with everything that is so India, going to a completely different culture? What did you have to learn or unlearn?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, Sonu. And I was, while I was very excited to take up the assignment when it came in, but I must confess I was very nervous as well. And the good thing was that one was moving within the organization. So in a way, there was this comfort of the similar culture and similar values and processes. And that was great. So I was not switching companies in that sense and then going to a country, as well, which was new. But in a developed country, the pace of life, the considerations, the way we approach work over here and work-life balance, something as basic as that. I would say that during that time, it was an absolute chalk and cheese. So in India, we used to, sort of working late, expecting everyone in the team to sort of working late, working weekends, responding to messages and things like that, because, work comes first and we're all out here to achieve. But we are a country of aspirers, right? We are working from an emerging markets perspective. But in a developed country, work-life balance is absolute paramount. And it can be taken negatively if, I as a manager did some strong follow-ups over the weekend and, didn't. So the biggest change in, my own demeanor and own management style was to plan things, keeping this cultural nuance. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a nuance. It is an absolute, chalk and cheese completely. I had to keep this in mind, that I can't, be operating from that same Indian manager's mindset. So people have, a different work phone. They even switch it off on the weekend and things like that. So one had to be very mindful. Even sending an email, etc., was considered not quite okay, right? And although I was not very conversant with the local laws, but I'm sure, there were lots of safeguards that if you did that, then it could be considered
You
toxic.
could be jailed.
Yeah, well, it would be considered toxic for sure. You'd get a warning letter or, something that you disturb my peace of mind and, you came in the way of my family life and, surfing and everything on the weekend. So I think there was definitely, that was a big change. That was a big management style change.
But Anup, just to stop you here. So, you talked about this work-life balance and how in India there is really no work-life balance. So why is it that everybody from around the world, NRIs, PIOs, even expats, Firangs, want to come to India to work?
Good question. So I think everyone wants to come to the land of opportunity, and land of opportunity India really is. We are the one bright spot, which is staying away from hopefully a war and progressing our citizens forward. I think everyone is enamored by the opportunity. But I think nobody wants to get their hands dirty, right?
Sorry, how do you mean that?
So look, if I come in with wealth from a developed country and I want to
Hmm.
grow my wealth, then this is the right country to put my money and
Hmm.
grow my wealth.
Hmm.
But do I want to put myself, into it? No. I think they would spend time selecting the right partners, the right
Hmm.
representatives, the
Hmm.
right investment managers, and so on
Hmm.
and so forth.
Hmm.
So, of course, one part of it is that we know the country far more intimately than they would ever do. But we know also how it works, and therefore we know how to get the work done.
Hmm.
So in fact, even in the venture capital world, there are, venture capital investors who are of Indian origin,
Hmm.
but they don't necessarily, stay in India.
Hmm.
They don't necessarily, operate out of India. And I've written some posts of my handle on LinkedIn, and some people have started to respond very favorably to that, and since started doing, saying things very proudly that how they are, sort of even stepping out of Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore, which is just, 8% of India's population.
Hmm.
Uh, so, how will you know about India and how it works, which is itself changing at such a fast pace,
Hmm.
right? If
Hmm.
one doesn't step out of one's own comfort zone
Hmm.
outside of, the 10 odd kilometers around one,
Hmm.
where one lives or works.
Hmm.
And if one, sort of drives more than 10 kilometers, then it's probably good to go to the airport.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
that doesn't give you a fair view of India. I
Hmm.
think as an investor, I definitely, bring this, in my practice, in my thinking. I go to tier two, tier three cities. Recently, I drove through Uttar Pradesh and went over to Uttarakhand. I've been to Punjab, and taken my family along with me. So these are absolutely so informative and educative in nature, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you come to empathize with the way things are executed on ground.
Hmm.
We have highways and we have toll plazas, and
Hmm.
that's common with the developed world. But
Hmm.
you can take 15 to 20 minutes at a toll plaza when there's a big jam. So
Hmm.
that is something which
Hmm.
is very India
Hmm.
specific.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one has to factor to that if one was to,
Yeah.
work in logistics, for example.
Yeah. So, what I hear you say is that in spite of all the chaos, in spite of the lack of work-life balance, India is a land of opportunity, and this is almost like the old El Dorado, and nobody wants to miss out, even if you have to work hard. And working hard differs. The definition of working hard differs, I guess, from people in the developed world and people in the developing world. Uh, you talked about some of the highs in your career, a couple of them. What has been, you know, something that hasn't worked for you, something that you look back and say, you know, this is something that I I have learned from. I mean, we normally
Right.
learn from our mistakes. If we don't
Yeah,
learn from our mistakes, we are condemned to make them again and again. But
correct.
what is it that you could or would like to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, my one big learning, and this is across both corporate life and life in general, and venture capital as well. This is also a very, fast evolving industry. It is just barely 10 years old as well. Uh, the corporatization of this is not yet happened, certainly in the early stage, and the venture capital space is completely green with a whole lot of
Yeah.
new, angels turned in, fund managers and so on and so forth. Uh, I think my learning across the spectrum has been that culture and values matter the most.
Hmm.
And whenever I have worked in organizations where uh, I shared a common set of values
Hmm.
with the organization, and other people also did the same,
Hmm.
it was simply wonderful.
Hmm.
It resulted in great productivity,
Hmm.
a great career experience,
Hmm.
and lifelong friendships came out of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I've also written a post on that when you work in such cultures, unconsciously you'll end up making these relationships. You don't have to work hard at them, right? People feel that maybe when they join corporates, they have to do networking and they have to work out who they want to build relationships with and what could be fruitful for them for career expansion, etc.
Yeah.
But in these cultures, you feel so much in harmony and at home, and you feel so well supported. And some of the root, values that are driving some of these cultures are fairness, ethics and governance, transparency, right? And these are things which also reflect in the venture capital world as well. This is a world where everyone's managing money, wants to give a return back to the LPs or investors, and wants to get their profit shares or what is called carry. And somebody starts a firm, other people join the firm, they have their respective shares. One has to be extremely mindful of some of these values. If these values are not respected, then it is very difficult to build large organizations, manage a large, portfolio of investors. Somewhere down the line, the speed breakers will present themselves, and one will run short of goodwill and support to be able to scale to one's, ambition. So there is no better example of this, I guess, from the corporate world. So some of the biggest companies, whether it is Google, whether it is a Procter and Gamble, whether it is an Apple, and so on and so forth. These are not just companies with great top lines and bottom lines, but they're also known to be great cultures, right? People spend, the average time that they would spend in these organizations would be much longer than the time that employees would spend in other organizations. So it is quite obvious that the underlying reason is actually values. And especially in venture capital, this becomes extremely important. Each fund is 8 to 10 years old. Long-term wealth creation for LPs is only possible when there is a long-term partnership between the partners of a firm, and there is longevity which is built in. Otherwise, long-term wealth creation is just not possible. There will be,
you're talking about long term, and especially in terms of venture capital. But before I come to that, when you talked about culture and values, and there are, like when I found myself in a culture which was bordering on toxic, I realized that I couldn't change it, even within my own department, because the organization culture is overpowering. I found that the best way was just to get out. And I see a lot of youngsters trapped in a company because, and where they are clearly unhappy. It could be nobody is really unhappy about the work that they do. People are clearly unhappy about the culture or their bosses. And my advice to everyone, anybody who asks me, is that if you find that you have a bad boss, or if you find that you're in a culture which doesn't, which is at variance from your own sets of values and culture, just get out. There are opportunities and opportunities around you, but don't stay in a culture which doesn't agree with you. But to come back to your venture capital, you kept talking about long term, long term, long term. Tell me if I'm wrong, but aren't all venture capital or all private equity and all, investors just keen on getting their quickest return? That poor promoter, he doesn't even get time to build his business. I mean, any business takes 5, 10 years to really be cured into something good. But here are the investors with a, like a hunter in their hand. Grow karo, 200% grow karo, profit lao, profit lao. What is the promoter supposed to do?
So, good, good question, Sonu. And this particularly This phenomenon was particularly seen in the year 2021, where lots of free capital from the developed world, interest rates were close to zero in the developed world. So money obviously moved to markets like venture capital, where returns were much higher than zero, and of course, therefore, a lot of money came into the space. Uh, and founders were actually giving feedback to venture capital investors that, look, you are driving me crazy. I'm burning money to essentially grow top line, at any cost, literally speaking, without even perfecting the product, the customer experience. I'm not getting that time because I have this constant month-on-month pressure, and growth is going to get me my next funding round. That's what you're telling me. Your friends in the business downstream are ready, and all they're looking at is growth. They don't care about anything else. So this phenomenon took place, and that's why we had stratospheric, valuations, which were completely, devoid of, I would say, logic, which comes from the public market space, that took place purely because of this phenomenon. And that's why, we have seen that coming out of that era, we have seen failed IPOs. At that point of time, many companies which were approaching the IPO markets, they did not approach the markets at that point of time. They withdrew their DRHPs, to work on profitability for another day. Those which were listed were marked down immediately to something like 25 to 30% of their, intended valuations. Look, public market investors, I feel, are the most savvy of investors, and they're spoiled for choice. So why would they put their money in a company which is growing but is essentially not profitable as yet, which means that it's not sustainable, and they come in to fund that journey? They are interested in both dividends and capital appreciation, not just one or the other. And they have a choice of other companies where they can put their money and get access to both in a risk-free fashion. Public markets are supposed to be lower on risk, largely speaking, because large and mid caps really drive the valuations in the market. Small caps, by definition, hold a very small percentage of that total market cap. So, and therefore, if you're aiming to be a $3 billion company or a $15 billion company, but you're not profitable, then the market is not going to respect, and that's exactly what happened at that point in time. So I think some of our venture capital, friends in the ecosystem can perhaps answer this better, who are the late stage players, but it really bucked up valuations beyond imagination at that particular period. But we are out of it. I think everybody's learned their lesson, and everyone's down to brass tacks. That's why we had what is called a funding winter in 2022-23. It's still not, we're still not out of the woods as yet. And lots of, mergers and acquisitions and, down rounds in, some of these inflated valuation driven companies.
Yeah.
I think all of that is very much par for the course of the moment.
Yeah. And so, what I started the conversation with was sabar ka phal meetha hota hai. So I think in the VC world and the investor world also, they should learn from this, that sabar ka phal meetha hota hai. You can't get the fruit to ripen at your will. It will take its own sweet time, and therefore allow the promoter, poor guy. I mean, he's the risk taker after all, and let them grow their businesses. So hopefully, we will see, as we become more developed, we will see that healthy work-life balance growing going forward. So Anup, thank you for your time, and very interesting conversation. And I'll catch you at a party where you are playing music.
Thank you so much, Sonu. I look forward to my fingers and are itching to play that playlist. It's been some time. So see you soon.
Yeah.